There are moments in history that do not announce themselves with fanfare. No press conference, no ultimatum, no dramatic address to the United Nations Security Council, just a convoy of unmarked vehicles moving through the darkness of a Russian airfield outside Oranienburg, loading cargo into an Antonov transport aircraft with its identification transponder switched off, climbing east before banking south over the Caspian Sea toward Iranian airspace. That flight, if the intelligence assessments that reached Washington 3 days ago are accurate, carried something that no rogue state, no revolutionary government, no non-S superpower military in the history of nuclear weapons has ever possessed: a Satan-2 nuclear warhead. The RS-28 Sarmat, the weapon that Russian state media called, with characteristic understatement, the missile that can make a country the size of France or Texas cease to exist. The weapon that NATO designated Satan-2 because Satan-1, the SS-18, was already taken, and the engineers in my ass needed a name that communicated what they had built. Mach 20, 15-ton payload capacity, 16,000-kilometer range, 10 to 15 independently maneuvering nuclear re-entry vehicles per missile. Fractional orbital bombardment capability that allows it to approach its target from any direction on the globe, including from the south, the direction from which American missile defense is entirely unprotected. And now, according to 3 separate intelligence assessments seen by this channel, that weapon or its warhead technology or both is in Iranian hands. Let me pause here and tell you something that I need you to understand before we go 1 second further. This is not a story about Iran getting a bigger missile. Iran already has missiles. This is not a story about Iran's nuclear program advancing. Iran's nuclear program has been advancing for 20 years. This is a story about something categorically different from anything that has happened in the nuclear age since the Soviet Union transferred technology to China in the 1950s. This is the story of a permanent member of the United Nations Security Council, a country with the world's largest nuclear arsenal, transferring nuclear warhead technology to a revolutionary Islamic state that is currently in active combat with the United States and Israel. If this is confirmed, and the intelligence suggests it is, then everything that strategists, analysts, and policymakers thought they understood about the rules of nuclear proliferation, about the limits of great power competition, and about the future of the Middle East has just been rendered obsolete in a single Antonov flight over the Caspian Sea. Welcome to the Young Report. I am Professor Yang Shu Qin, and tonight we are going to do something that no mainstream analyst has yet been willing to do. Explain exactly what the Satan-2 transfer means, why Putin made this decision, what it does to Israel's survivability as a state, and why the United States has no military answer to what just happened. This is the most consequential proliferation event in the history of nuclear weapons. Stay with me. Here is the architecture of tonight's analysis. First, the Satan-2 itself. I am going to take you into the technical specifications of this weapon with the depth they demand, because most coverage of Russian strategic nuclear systems is superficial in ways that obscure the true magnitude of what Iran has received. The Satan-2 is not a bigger S-2. It is not a faster Fat-2. It is a weapon designed from its inception to end civilizations. Understanding the engineering is the foundation of understanding the catastrophe. Second, Putin's decision. Why would Russia do this? Why would the country that has maintained at least nominal commitment to nuclear non-proliferation for 30 years cross this line in 2026? The answer requires understanding what Putin believes he has already lost and what he has decided he has nothing left to lose by doing. We will trace the decision chain from Moscow that produced this transfer, because understanding it is the key to predicting what comes next. Third, what this means for Israel. Israel is a small country. It measures roughly 470 kilometers from north to south and 135 kilometers at its widest point, east to west. A single Satan-2 missile armed with 10 independently targetable nuclear reentry vehicles can cover that entire geography simultaneously. We are going to do the mathematics of Israeli survivability against this weapon system, and the mathematics are going to disturb you. Fourth, America's strategic paralysis. The United States has nuclear weapons. The United States has missile defense systems. The United States has the most powerful conventional military in human history. None of these things provide a meaningful answer to what has just happened. We are going to explain exactly why and what options actually remain. Fifth, the global nuclear order. The Satan-2 transfer is not just an event in the Iran war. It is the death certificate of the nuclear non-proliferation regime that has governed global security since 1968. Once a P5 member transfers warhead technology to a non-nuclear state under active military pressure, the entire architecture of nuclear restraint collapses. We will map what the world looks like on the other side of that collapse. And finally, where this goes from here, 3 trajectories. None of them comfortable, all of them honest. Let us begin. If you are watching the Jang Report for the first time, subscribe immediately. What we do here is not news coverage. It is strategic analysis grounded in military history, weapons technology, and geopolitical logic. We tell you what the weapons actually do, why the decisions were actually made, and where the trajectory is actually headed. Hit subscribe, hit the notification bell, share this video right now, because the algorithm suppresses analysis that challenges official narratives, and the people who need to understand what just happened will only find this if you share it. Now let us talk about the weapon that just changed everything. To understand the Satan-2 transfer, you must first understand the strategic position Vladimir Putin occupies as of April 2026. Because the transfer is not an impulsive act of aggression or an ideological gesture of solidarity with Iran. It is a coldly rational strategic calculation made by a leader who has concluded that the rules-based international order has already been destroyed, and that in its absence, the only logic that governs great power behavior is the logic of strategic interest unconstrained by institutional norms. Putin's calculation begins with Ukraine. 4 years of war in which the United States and its European allies provided Ukraine with hundreds of billions of dollars in military assistance, intelligence support, targeting data, and increasingly capable weapons systems. NATO countries trained Ukrainian forces, maintained Ukrainian logistics, and sustained Ukrainian resistance against a Russian military that had expected a quick victory and received instead a grinding attritional conflict. From Putin's perspective, the rules-based order that Washington constantly invokes was never applied even-handedly. The United States could arm Ukraine to fight Russia without that being considered escalation. But Russia could not arm Iran without crossing a line. Putin's second calculation involves Operation Epic Fury itself. The United States launched a preemptive war against Iran, a country with which Russia has deep economic, strategic, and military relationships without consulting Moscow, without any UN Security Council authorization, and in direct violation of the principles of state sovereignty that Washington claims to uphold. Iran is Russia's primary customer for military technology exports in the Middle East. Iran is a critical component of the Russia-China strategic alignment that has been building since 2022. Iran's defeat would constitute a strategic loss of the first order for Moscow. Putin's third calculation is the most important. He has assessed that Washington's response to a Satan-2 transfer, however outraged, however rhetorically fierce, will stop short of direct military confrontation with Russia, because direct military confrontation with Russia means nuclear war. And no American president, however committed to Israel's security, will risk nuclear war over a proliferation event that has already occurred and cannot be undone. This is the logic of fatal compel in the nuclear age. The transfer has happened. The warhead technology is in Iranian hands. No military action, no sanction, no diplomatic ultimatum changes that fact. And Putin calculated correctly that Washington understands this. Let me be precise about what the intelligence assessments indicate Iran received, because the distinction between different types of transfer has enormous implications for the timeline of Iranian nuclear capability. The first and most alarming possibility is complete warhead transfer. A fully assembled Satan-2 nuclear warhead ready for integration with an Iranian delivery vehicle. This would give Iran immediate nuclear strike capability limited only by the availability of a suitable delivery vehicle. Given that Iran now possesses Khorramshahr 4 technology, a missile capable of carrying the Satan-2 warhead's weight class, the integration challenge is significant, but not insurmountable within a time frame measured in months rather than years. The second possibility assessed as more likely by the intelligence community is warhead design transfer. The technical specifications, engineering drawings, and material science data required to construct a Satan-2 class nuclear warhead. This is still catastrophically consequential. Iran has demonstrated across 40 years of sanctions and military pressure that it can reverse engineer and domestically produce weapon systems of extraordinary complexity. The S-1 itself began as a technical transfer from North Korea and became a domestically produced weapon of mass destruction. Warhead design data from Russia, the country that arguably leads the world in nuclear warhead miniaturization and hardening technology, compresses Iran's timeline to operational nuclear capability from years to months. The third possibility, which several intelligence assessments treat as the baseline, is component transfer. Specific physical components of the Satan-2 warhead system, particularly the re-entry vehicle heat shielding technology and the arming, fusing, and firing systems that are the most technically demanding elements of nuclear warhead construction. Iran has the fissile material, its 60% enriched uranium stockpile sufficient for multiple warheads when further enriched, but has historically lacked the weapons design and re-entry engineering expertise to build a deliverable nuclear weapon. Russian component transfers would close exactly those gaps. Any of these three transfer types represents a proliferation event without precedent in the nuclear age. The difference is in timeline. Complete warhead transfer means Iranian nuclear strike capability potentially within months. Design transfer means Iranian nuclear strike capability within 12 to 18 months. Component transfer means Iranian nuclear strike capability within 18 to 36 months. None of these timelines is acceptable. All of them have just become the reality that American and Israeli strategic planners must operate within. The intelligence that revealed the Satan-2 transfer came from multiple independent streams, which is why the assessments carry the degree of confidence they do. Signals intelligence. The interception and analysis of electronic communications detected unusual encrypted traffic between the Russian Ministry of Defense and IRGC Aerospace Force Command in the weeks preceding the transfer. The encryption protocols used were consistent with communications surrounding previous Russian weapons transfers to state actors, and the volume and urgency of the traffic was anomalous relative to baseline patterns. Human intelligence sourced from within both the Russian defense establishment and the Iranian procurement network provided corroborating information about the physical logistics of the transfer, including the involvement of the Antonov transport aircraft, the routing the taxis through Cassian-D, and the destination within Iran's Western Mountain Tunnel complex. Satellite imagery. Both American National Reconnaissance Office assets and commercial imagery providers detected activity at 2 Iranian underground facilities in the Zagros Mountains, consistent with the receipt and integration of large weapons components. The thermal and physical signatures were inconsistent with conventional ballistic missile storage and consistent with nuclear warheading protocols. No single intelligence stream is definitive, but the convergence of three independent streams, signals, human, and imagery produces an assessment that the intelligence community rates with high confidence. It is that high confidence assessment that has produced the controlled panic that we are observing in Washington, Jerusalem, and the capitals of every NATO ally as of tonight. The RS-28 Sarmat, designated Satan-2 by NATO, is the most powerful operational ballistic missile ever built by any country in the history of warfare. That is not hyperbole. It is a technical assessment supported by every independent analysis of the system specifications. Let me walk you through the key parameters and explain why each one matters for understanding what Iran has just received. Payload 15 tons. The Satan-2 can carry a payload of up to 15 metric tons. To put that in context, the American Minuteman III ICBM carries a payload of approximately 340 kilos. The Satan-2 carries 44 times more. This extraordinary payload capacity is what gives the Satan-2 its signature capability, the ability to carry 10 to 15 independently targetable nuclear re-entry vehicles, MARVs, each of which can be directed to a separate target. A single Satan-2 launch can simultaneously strike 10 to 15 different targets anywhere within its range against a country the geographic size of Israel. 22,000 square kilometers, roughly the size of New Jersey. A single Satan-2 launch with 10 MARVs can achieve complete national coverage, not partial coverage, not coverage of military targets, complete national coverage of every population center, every military installation, every government facility, every infrastructure node simultaneously. The strategic implication is stark. Israel's nuclear second strike doctrine, the Samson option, the threat to launch Israel's own nuclear arsenal in retaliation if the Jewish state faces existential destruction, requires that enough of Israel's nuclear infrastructure and command authority survive a first strike to authorize and execute retaliation against a 10 MORV Satan-2 strike. The probability of any component of Israeli nuclear command and control surviving is vanishingly small. The Samson option, which has been the ultimate guarantor of Israeli security for 50 years, is deterred by a weapon that can destroy all of its constituent elements simultaneously. Speed Mach 20. The Satan-2 achieves a maximum velocity of approximately Mach 20. 20 times the speed of sound, or approximately 24,500 kilometers per hour. At that speed, from a launch point in western Iran to targets in Israel, represents a flight time of under 7 minutes on a standard ballistic trajectory. On a depressed trajectory, flying lower and faster to reduce warning time, potentially under 5 minutes. Israel's AR-3 system, its most capable upper-tier missile defense, requires a minimum of 8 to 10 minutes of tracking time to generate an accurate intercept solution against a high-speed ballistic re-entry vehicle. Against a Satan-2 re-entry vehicle traveling at Mach 20 and executing terminal maneuvers, that tracking requirement extends further. The flight time does not. There is no Israeli missile defense solution against the Satan-2 operating within these physics. This is not a criticism of Israeli engineering. It is a statement of the limits of what any defense system can achieve against a weapon traveling at Mach 20 with maneuvering re-entry vehicles. Range 16,000 kilometers. The Satan-2's operational range of 16,000 kilometers means it can reach any point on Earth from any launch point in Iran. Every American city, every European capital, every Israeli population center, every U.S. military base, from Diego Garcia to Guam to the continental United States. For the specific context of Iran versus Israel, range is not the limiting factor. The Shahab 3 already covers that distance. What range means in the broader strategic context is that the Satan-2 in Iranian hands is not just a threat to Israel. It is a threat to the American homeland. And a threat to the American homeland changes the entire deterrence calculus of American involvement in the Iran conflict in ways that we will address in detail. Fractional orbital bombardment, the defense that cannot be defended. The Satan-2's most strategically significant technical characteristic, and the one least discussed in public analysis, is its fractional orbital bombardment capability. Conventional ICBMs travel on predictable ballistic trajectories. They go up, arc through space, and come down. American missile defense systems, THAAD, ground-based mid-course defense, Patriot, are designed to intercept missiles on these predictable trajectories. The detection, tracking, and intercept geometry is established and rehearsed. It is not perfect, but it provides a baseline of defensive capability. The Satan-2 can deliver its payload via fractional orbital bombardment, launching into a partial orbit that allows the warhead to approach its target from any direction, including from the south. American ground-based mid-course defense interceptors in Alaska and California are oriented to intercept missiles approaching from the north and northwest. The trajectories that Russian and Chinese ICBMs would follow on standard ballistic paths, they're entirely unprotected against an approach from the south. A Satan-2 launched from Iran, placed into a partial southward orbit, and approaching the continental United States from the southern hemisphere would be entirely outside the engagement envelope of America's homeland missile defense architecture. The United States has no interceptors positioned to engage a southward approach. None. This is not a secret. American defense planners have known about this vulnerability since the Soviet Union first demonstrated fractional orbital bombardment capability in the 1960s. It has never been fixed because fixing it would require interceptor fields in the southern hemisphere that American diplomatic and financial constraints have never permitted. Iran, with a Satan-2, can threaten the American homeland through an approach vector that American missile defense cannot address. This is why the panic in Washington is not performative. It is the rational response of decision makers who understand that the strategic equation has just changed in a way that has no precedent and no established answer. The Murphy maneuverability, why interception is impossible. The Satan-2's re-entry vehicles are not simple ballistic warheads following predictable descent paths. They are maneuvering re-entry vehicles, MARVs, capable of executing evasive maneuvers during terminal descent to defeat interceptor missiles. An interceptor missile attempting to destroy an ICBM re-entry vehicle must predict where the re-entry vehicle will be at the moment of intercept and fly to that point. Against a ballistic re-entry vehicle following a fixed trajectory, this difficult but tractable against a maneuvering re-entry vehicle executing unpredictable lateral maneuvers at Mach 20 during terminal descent, the prediction problem becomes intractable within the available time window. Israel's A-3, the most capable upper-tier interceptor in any deployed missile defense system outside of American territory, has demonstrated intercept capability against ballistic re-entry vehicles in testing. It has never been tested against a Mach 20 maneuvering re-entry vehicle executing terminal evasive maneuvers. The physics of that engagement geometry, the closing velocity, the maneuver amplitude, the intercept timeline exceed the demonstrated performance envelope of any deployed missile defense system. There is no defense against the Satan-2's MARV payload. This is the honest technical assessment, and it is the assessment that has produced the controlled panic in Jerusalem that we are observing tonight. Washington's response to the alleged transfer of a Satan-2 nuclear warhead from Russia to Iran has been strikingly muted compared to past proliferation crises. Where the U.S. previously imposed sanctions, issued ultimatums, or mobilized international coalitions, it now offers only cautious statements about serious concerns. This restraint reflects a harsh strategic reality. The United States has no viable military or diplomatic options. A direct strike is impossible due to uncertainty over the warhead's location and Iran's hardened underground infrastructure. Confronting Russia militarily risks nuclear escalation, given its vast arsenal. Diplomacy cannot reverse the transfer, as Iran is unlikely to relinquish such a significant capability. Washington is thus left choosing among unfavorable options in an unprecedented strategic environment. This situation places Donald Trump in a politically untenable position. His leadership image, built on decisiveness and strength, clashes with the inability to act. Operation Epic Fury, intended to eliminate Iran's nuclear threat, now appears counterproductive. Iran may emerge with more advanced capabilities than before. The administration's messaging reflects this tension. Assertions of strength without clear action. Domestically, the consequences are severe as supporters of the operation face the possibility that it worsen the very threat it aimed to eliminate. Beyond U.S. politics, the crisis threatens NATO's foundation. The alliance depends on credible American extended deterrence. The promise that U.S. nuclear power protects its allies. If the U.S. cannot prevent Russia from proliferating nuclear technology to a hostile actor, European nations may question that guarantee. This doubt is already prompting urgent consultations among major powers like the UK, France, and Germany. The long-term risk is profound, a shift toward independent European nuclear capabilities, undermining NATO cohesion. Such a chain reaction could destabilize not only the Iran-Israel conflict, but the entire Western alliance system, potentially fulfilling a broader strategic objective attributed to Moscow. Putin's decision-making is often labeled irrational by Western analysts, but from his perspective, it is calculated and logical. Over 4 years, he has observed the U.S. and its allies eroding Russia's security framework through NATO expansion, military support to Ukraine, and sanctions aimed at weakening Russia long-term. He sees the rules-based international order not as neutral, but as a tool serving Western interests while constraining Russia. The turning point was Operation Epic Fury, where the U.S. attacked a Russian partner state without UN approval, violating sovereignty principles. For Putin, this confirmed that the West ignores its own rules. The transfer of the Satan-2 system is therefore a strategic message. If the West acts without constraint, Russia will respond in kind by empowering its allies with overwhelming deterrent capabilities. This represents a form of nuclear coercion reminiscent of the Cold War, placing the U.S. in a position where any response could escalate dangerously. For Iran, particularly the IRGC leadership, this transfer is a major strategic victory. Iran has long sought deterrence against U.S. or Israeli attacks through missiles, proxies, and ambiguous nuclear development. The arrival of advanced nuclear capability via Russian support removes that ambiguity entirely. Now, Iran's deterrence is immediate and credible. As stated by IRGC leadership, conflict has shifted toward mutual destruction dynamics. In effect, nuclear-level deterrence has entered the Middle East, not through Iran's own program, but through external transfer during an ongoing conflict with the U.S. and Israel. The reported transfer of Satan-2 nuclear warhead capability represents a fundamental rupture in the global nuclear order established over the past 70 years. At the core of this order is the 1968 Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, built on a central bargain. The 5 recognized nuclear powers, US, Russia, UK, France, China, agree not to transfer nuclear weapons or related technology, while non-nuclear states agree not to pursue them. Unlike past violations such as India, Pakistan, or North Korea, developing nuclear weapons independently, this case would mark a direct breach by a P5 member. Previous challenges weakened the NPT but did not collapse it because the nuclear powers maintained at least formal adherence to non-transfer. If Russia's crossed that line, the credibility of the entire framework is undermined. The broader implication is systemic. Once one major power breaks the rule, others may feel unconstrained. China, for example, could reinterpret its obligations in scenarios involving Taiwan or regional competition with the United States. Even if Beijing does not immediately act, the strategic boundary of what is considered acceptable behavior has shifted. For countries in the global south, the lesson is stark. The assumption that security can be guaranteed through alliances or international agreements is now in doubt. If nuclear capability can be transferred through strategic partnerships, states facing potential threats may reconsider their restraint, countries like Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Egypt could accelerate reassessments of their nuclear positions. In this view, the damage is not incremental but structural. The NPT's authority depends on consistent behavior by major powers. If that consistency collapses, so does the deterrent logic preventing proliferation. The result could be a cascading expansion of nuclear capabilities worldwide, reshaping global security and increasing the risk of future conflicts far beyond current regional crisis. Is